Welcome to Immigration Briefing. The content of the briefing includes Russians banned from travel to hand over passports within 5 days decree. Australia plans to have migrant intake, tighten student visa rules. Sunak risks Commons revolt unless he toughens up Rwanda bill. Australia's PM faces key test as voter economic backlash deepens. From takeoff to crash landing, the 6 possible outcomes for Rishi Sunak's Rwanda bill. Russians banned from travel to hand over passports within 5 days decree. Reuters. A new government decree in Russia states that those who have been banned from traveling abroad must hand over their passports to authorities within 5 days of being notified. This applies to individuals who have been banned on various grounds, such as conscripts, employees of the Federal Security Service, convicts, or those with access to state secrets. The passports will be stored by the authorities that issued them and can be returned once the travel ban is lifted. The decree also states that those who were banned from traveling due to conscription must provide a military ID and proof of completed service to have their passports returned. This move comes after reports that Russia's security services were confiscating the passports of senior officials and state company executives to prevent overseas travel. Australia plans to have migrant intake, tighten student visa rules. Nikkei Asia. Australia has announced plans to tighten visa rules for international students and low-skilled workers, potentially having its migrant intake over the next 2 years. The decision comes as the government seeks to overhaul what it describes as a broken migration system. Net immigration is expected to have peaked at a record 510,000 in 2022-23, but is forecast to fall to around 250,000 in 2024-25 and 2025-26. The new policies will require international students to have higher ratings on English tests and will end the ability for students to prolong their stay in Australia. A new specialist visa for highly skilled workers will also be introduced, with a processing time of just 1 week. Sunak risks Commons revolt unless he toughens up Rwanda bill. Telegraph. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is facing pressure from Conservative MPs to make changes to his proposed Rwanda bill or risk a rebellion in Parliament. A group of Conservative lawyers, known as the Star Chamber, is expected to recommend significant amendments to the bill, including further restrictions on the right of individual migrants to appeal and a blanket ban on interventions by Strasbourg judges. The findings of the Star Chamber, chaired by MP Sir Bill Cash, will be published on Monday and are likely to be supported by other groups of MPs, including the European Research Group and the One Nation Conservatives. The bill is set to be voted on in the Commons on Tuesday, and just 29 Tory MPs need to vote against it for the government to lose. Some MPs have threatened to abstain or vote against the bill if Sunak does not agree to consider amendments. The bill, which aims to facilitate the deportation of migrants who entered the UK illegally, has been met with criticism from opposition parties and human rights groups. Australia's PM faces key test as voter economic backlash deepens. Bloomberg. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is facing a decline in approval ratings as public discontent grows over issues such as inflation and immigration. Albanese's approval rating has dropped from 62% last year to 40% currently, and opposition leader Peter Dutton has begun speculating about the Liberal National Coalition returning to government sooner than expected. Albanese's decision to push ahead with a referendum on writing an Indigenous advisory body into the Constitution was heavily defeated and opened his government to criticism. Other issues affecting the government's popularity include the Israel-Hamas conflict, rising petrol prices, and a recent High Court ruling on long-term detainees. Albanese's lawmakers are starting to show signs of uncertainty, with some concerned about the impact of further interest rate hikes on mortgage holders. Despite the challenges, there is no sign of leadership speculation against Albanese in Canberra, and Labour is likely to head into the next election with an economy on the upswing. From takeoff to crash landing, the 6 possible outcomes for Rishi Sunak's Rwanda bill. Telegraph. UK Chancellor Rishi Sunak is facing 6 possible scenarios in relation to his proposed Rwanda bill on migrant deportation flights. The worst-case scenario would involve an instant defeat of the bill by Tory rebels, which would deal a blow to Sunak's premiership. Other scenarios include delays, concessions to appease rebels, deadlock in the Lords, approval and takeoff, or further legal challenges. The bill, which aims to prevent legal challenges to deportation flights, is set to be put before the Commons on Tuesday. Back the Rwanda bill or risk the sovereignty of Parliament, say KCs. Telegraph. A bill to send asylum seekers to Rwanda would collapse the scheme and risk breaching international law, 4 barristers have warned. The emergency legislation would make it impossible to challenge removal, and closes down the majority of grounds for appeal. However, the barristers, including Geoffrey Cox, the former Attorney General, have said that further provisions would be at odds with the UK's treaty obligations under the Refugee Convention. They also claim that denying migrants the right to appeal would breach Article 13 of the European Convention on Human Rights. The barristers warned that the courts could challenge the assumption in the bill that Parliament was sovereign by denying asylum seekers any right to appeal. The bill would still allow migrants to claim if they would face serious and irreversible harm if deported to Rwanda. French immigration bill causes uproar. Deutsche Welle. Thousands of people were marching in the streets near Montparnasse train station in southern Paris on a recent Sunday afternoon. They were holding signs proclaiming their opposition to the Darmanin law, named after France's interior minister. Other placards said immigration is not a problem, racism is. Right at the front of the group, a megaphone in hand, was Amada Sibi. The 33-year-old Malian arrived in France almost 5 years ago. Benefiting from a legal loophole, he has been using other people's papers to work as a cleaner, a chambermaid and, lately, a dishwasher. Most of us undocumented immigrants are using this method, but it means we are paying social insurance fees and taxes without benefiting from services such as regular public health care like French citizens, he told DW. President Emmanuel Macron's government treats us as if we were nothing, although we're doing all the dirty work at construction sites, including the ones for the Paris Olympics next summer, in restaurants and as cleaners, he added. That's why CB and others have banded together to protest the bill, which France's government said is a compromise including left-wing and right-wing measures. The draft law is set to be discussed in the National Assembly, France's lower house of parliament, starting on Monday, December 11, 2023, and could enter into force early next year. The final version of the immigration bill still needs to be pinned down, but some details are already known. The new bill is likely to fast-track asylum procedures and shorten delays for appeals, make family reunifications more complicated and restrict the possibility to come to France for medical treatment. Changes also include the option of deporting people who were younger than 13 when they came to France, and deporting foreign parents whose children have French citizenship. Paris was planning to create a one-year green card for people working in sectors with a labor shortage. But as it stands now, the decisions on these one-year permits are left up to local authorities. French Interior Minister Gerald Darmanin brought the immigration reform bill into the Senate. But France's upper house of parliament, which has a centre-right majority, recently considerably toughened the draft. And the government is expected to keep some of these changes to get the bill through the National Assembly. Macron's Renaissance Party and its allies don't have an absolute majority there and need the conservative Republicans' support. Since a recent terror attack by a Russian immigrant on French teacher Dominique Bernard in the northern town of Arras, the government presents the law mostly as a safeguard against unwanted immigration and terrorism. Migrants, refugees, and aid organizations are worried the new rules could lead to more stigmatization and discrimination. Lisa Farron from Paris-based CIMAID, an NGO providing support for refugees and migrants, is one of those who is deeply concerned. The government had promised a balanced bill, and yet, the new rules will almost exclusively restrict immigrants' rights and make it more complicated for them to get legalized, which will result in even more undocumented migrants, she told DW. France has voted through many immigration bills, but it feels like we are passing a new threshold of toughness with this one, for example, by making it easier to expel foreign parents of French children, which was beforehand only possible if they had committed serious crimes, Farron added. To view this video, please enable JavaScript, and consider upgrading to a web browser that supports HTML5 video. For Vincent Tiberge, professor for political sociology at University Sciences Po Bordeaux, the draft law is reflecting a general shift to the right in the political debate. Most French politicians are depicting immigrants as a burden and a threat. They completely forget that many migrants, also of later generations, are contributing a whole lot to our society, he told DW. The sociologist thinks mainstream politicians are out to grab right-wing votes. Far-right party Rassemblement National is predicted to come first in next June's European Parliament elections according to polls. And yet, parties such as Renaissance should know this strategy doesn't work. It only legitimizes far-right movements and helps them gain even more ground, Tiberge said. Alexis Izard, Renaissance parliamentarian for the Department of Essonne just south of Paris, says the final bill will still be balanced. Every year, we need to expel about 4,000 illegal immigrants who have committed crimes, and that will be possible with this new law, he told DW, adding that deportation procedures would take 1 instead of 2 years after the changes. At the same time, we want to attract those who come here and work. This will be a highly efficient law, Izard said. Hervé Lebras, historian and demographer at the Paris-based School for Advanced Studies in the Social Sciences EHESS, begs to differ on that last point. He says none of the more than 100 other immigration laws since 1945 have been effective. The bill is completely useless and will have practically no impact on the number of migrants coming in per year. It only gives politicians, from the far right to the far left, a platform to express their stance, he stated in an interview with DW. If you look at the immigration figures under past governments, you'll see that they are uncorrelated to politics, he said. Alain Fontaine, owner of the restaurant Le Mesterette in central Paris and head of France's Association of Restaurant Owners, is still hoping the initially planned one-year green card will be put back in and even extended. Bars and restaurants won't be able to function without foreign workers who represent about a quarter of our workforce, he told DW. Some 12 out of his own 27 employees are foreigners. We need immigrants also since our own youth prefer to work in the digital sector or jobs linked to the protection of the environment, he said. They no longer want to do the tough jobs. Malian immigrant Amada Sibi doesn't think the automatic one-year green card, even if prolonged, would be the right way forward. It would enshrine modern slavery into law, as we would need to work in that one sector to keep it. You'd still be at the boss's mercy, he said, sitting on his bed in a 15 square meter, 161 square feet, room in the suburb of Montreal east of Paris, a studio flat he's sharing with an uncle and a cousin. We want the government to legalize all of us, so that we can choose the job we'd like to do, he added. Then, CB looked at pictures of himself 5 years ago, after he had reached Spain from Morocco on a small inflatable boat. He thinks of the crossing, which took almost a whole day, as the most difficult moment in my life. Everyone on board almost died. Once you've survived this, you don't just give up, CB said. I'm determined to fight for a better future. Edited by Carla Bleeker. Nigel Farage. I'm a celebrity. Popularity will boost our election hopes, says Reform leader. Telegraph. Nigel Farage's appearance on the reality show I'm a Celebrity. Get Me Out of Here has given him a platform to help save Britain in a potential early election, according to Richard Tice, leader of the Reform UK party. Tice said Farage's popularity on the show demonstrated that he is in touch with the people, unlike most politicians in Westminster. Tice also revealed that Reform UK is already full-on planning for an early spring election, amid ongoing splits in the Conservative Party over immigration and the Rwanda bill proposed by Rishi Sunak. Recent polls have shown that Reform UK is now backed by 1 in 10 voters, with analysis suggesting that this growth could cost the Conservatives up to 35 seats and give Labour a parliamentary majority. Rishi Sunak's Rwanda bill to face Tory rebels in key vote, Live. The Independent. Senior Conservatives are urging their fellow Tory MPs to support Rishi Sunak's Rwanda plan in a Commons vote next week, despite criticism from a star chamber of lawyers who have deemed the legislation not fit for purpose. The crucial vote is currently hanging on a margin of 28 ballots, and the support of hardline Tories could be crucial for Sunak's premiership. Some MPs are accused of plotting against Sunak and seeking to boost their own leadership profiles, while others are reportedly planning an advent calendar of S for Sunak and plotting the return of Boris Johnson on a leadership bid with Nigel Farage. The article also highlights concerns from mixed nationality couples regarding the new immigration legislation, which doubles the earning requirement for obtaining a spouse visa in the UK. This article highlights the political challenges facing Rishi Sunak and his proposed legislation to send asylum seekers from the UK to Rwanda. The bill is facing opposition from a group of lawyers who have deemed it not fit for purpose, and it is unclear whether Sunak will be able to secure enough support from his own party to pass the legislation. The article also mentions internal plotting within the Conservative Party, with some MPs reportedly seeking to undermine Sunak's leadership. In addition, the concerns of mixed nationality couples regarding the new immigration legislation are highlighted, as it raises the earning requirement for obtaining a spouse visa in the UK. Overall, this article reflects the political challenges and divisions that Sunak is facing within his own party as he seeks to pass his Rwanda plan. Tory Star Chamber to call for block on Strasbourg judges halting Rwanda flights. Telegraph. A group of Conservative lawyers, led by MP Sir Bill Cash, will call for a legal block on attempts by Strasbourg judges to halt further deportation flights to Rwanda. They argue that the emergency legislation proposed by Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, needs significant changes to get the flights off the ground. The lawyers will recommend tougher powers to block injunctions by European judges and tighter curbs on the legal rights of illegal migrants to challenge their deportations. The lawyers' findings will be published on Monday and are expected to influence right-wing MPs' support for the legislation. Married couples share their outrage at the new immigration plan. The Independent. New immigration legislation in the UK has doubled the earning requirement for obtaining a spouse visa, leaving thousands of mixed nationality couples in a state of uncertainty. From April, partners hoping to settle in the UK on a spouse visa will only be able to do so if their husband or wife is earning £38,700, a £20,000 increase from the current figure of £18,700. The cost of a spousal visa is £1,846 and it has to be renewed every 2.5 years. Concerns have been raised that the new rules will prevent many British workers from being able to bring their spouse from abroad. The legislation will force many families to leave the UK or face the prospect of being separated from their loved ones. Campaigners argue that the new rules are unnecessary and punitive, and that they will cause significant harm to families across the country. Ottawa eyes change to border rules for Indigenous communities. It is an injustice that continues to divide our people. The Toronto Star. The Canadian government has opened discussions on the rights of Indigenous peoples to migrate and move freely. Many Indigenous communities have been divided by the international borders that cross their ancestral lands and have, for a long time, been restricted by border controls when they try to move around on the lands that were seized from them. Indigenous communities have fought for years to reclaim their rights, which they say go beyond the convenience of travel and to the core of their self-determination. In some cases, entire communities are divided on both sides of the border. The Canadian government made a recommendation in a 2017 report to recognize the Jay Treaty, which allows American Indians to move freely across the international boundary, or amend the immigration law to permit anyone who is a member of a Canadian First Nation or a member of a federally recognized U.S. tribe the right to enter and remain in Canada as they can in the U.S. New migration strategy to clamp down on migrants living in Australia in a permanently temporary state. ABC. The Australian government is planning to increase English language requirements for international students and implement new restrictions to curb visa hopping and reduce the number of migrants living in a permanently temporary state in the country. The government will also create a new temporary skills in demand visa to attract highly skilled workers who can contribute to the Australian workforce. Australia's net migration level is forecast to fall from 510,000 in 2020 to 375,000 in 2021 and 250,000 in 2025. Leading Senate Democrat on border talks, Republican demands are unreasonable. Politico. The U.S. Senate faces a busy final week of sessions before its holiday break, with the outcome of ongoing border talks uncertain. Republicans have linked their support of a $106 billion supplemental spending bill to a deal on border policy changes. Democrats have said the demands for the deal are unreasonable and have already rejected some of the proposals. There is some openness from Democrats to a deal on asylum claims, but some lawmakers remain unhappy about the border policy being discussed under these circumstances. Well, my dear viewers, it seems that immigration is the hot topic of the day in countries around the world. From Russia to Australia, the UK to Canada, governments are grappling with the issue and proposing new policies to address it. And let me tell you, it's not an easy task. Immigration is a complex issue that touches on everything from national security to human rights, and finding the right balance is no easy feat. In Russia, the government has issued a decree requiring individuals who have been banned from traveling abroad to hand over their passports within 5 days. This move comes after reports that senior officials and state company executives were having their passports confiscated to prevent overseas travel. It's an interesting approach to restricting movement, but one that raises questions about individual freedoms and the right to travel. Meanwhile, in Australia, the government is planning to have its migrant intake and tighten visa rules for international students and low-skilled workers. They say it's part of an effort to overhaul their broken migration system, but critics argue that it will do more harm than good. With concerns about labor shortages and the impact on the economy, it remains to be seen whether these new policies will be effective. And in the UK, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is facing pressure from Conservative MPs to make changes to his proposed Rwanda bill or risk a rebellion in Parliament. The bill aims to facilitate the deportation of migrants who entered the UK illegally, but it has been met with criticism from opposition parties and human rights groups. It's a contentious issue that highlights the divisions within the Conservative Party and the challenges of passing immigration legislation. But it's not just governments that are grappling with immigration. In France, thousands of people took to the streets to protest against a new immigration law that they say will lead to more stigmatization and discrimination. It's a reminder that immigration is not just a political issue, but a deeply personal one that affects individuals and families. So, my dear viewers, what do you make of all this immigration news? Are these new policies the right approach, or are there better solutions out there? I'd love to hear your thoughts and discuss this important issue further. Let's open up the conversation and see if we can find some common ground. After all, when it comes to immigration, we're all in the same boat, trying to navigate these choppy waters together. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.